Welcome to episode 56 of the Cohesive Home Podcast. I'm Melissa.
And I'm Kate. Cohesive Home is your place for living intentionally and simply as a family.
We may be lazy minimalists, but we know how to use minimalism as a tool to create the lives that we want.
Stick around and we'll show you how. We recently had a listener email us with a question, and so today Melissa and I wanted to take some time to actually dive into this question because we think it's such a good one, and we have a feeling that it's one that you might struggle with as well.
So a listener said, how do you all figure out how to live intentionally every day instead of reactively? I know what my values are, but I'm not sure how to be purposeful on a daily basis and to actually live them. Wow. Okay, Kate. We can open some can of worms, big old can of worms, I think, on this one. So do you want to start with diving into this?
Yeah, I am definitely happy to kickstart this conversation. So Melissa and I had kind of talked a little bit about this earlier, and we feel that there are 5 ways to make sure that you are actually living intentionally instead of reactively. And so we're going to just dive into these throughout the entire episode. Now, the first one is to actually know your values. Now, our listener did say that she knows her values and she's trying to live them. And I think that we all kind of know deep down what it is that we value, but sometimes it is really helpful to take some time to reflect on those, write them down, and make sure that you're really clear on what it is you value as a family.
Right. Because, and a lot of these tips we're going to give you can always change throughout the year. So say you did this, 5 years ago, sit down and maybe even just with your partner, your spouse, and talk about what your values are. Because there could be things that, your husband or wife or whoever, they value, but maybe it's not as big of a deal to you. So knowing as a family what your values are really important.
Yeah, and like Melissa said, these do change. I didn't tell you this, Melissa, but someone asked me the other day what my family's values are. And I really had to pause and think about it because, yes, I have written them down before. We have talked about them endlessly. Obviously, if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you probably know my family's values just as well as I do. But, as I was thinking about them, there were a few that changed. And that's okay because, our lives have changed.
Right. The ebbs and flows of just life can... Or I should say too, and we'll dive into this later. I mean, for me and my family, there have been things that I've learned that have changed what I value, or brought to the surface other things that I've maybe pushed back in the past. They haven't been as important to me, and now they are. So, right, taking that time to really figure those out is good.
Well, and I think it's also important to make sure that you separate your values from your goals, because it can be kind of easy to confuse the two.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right? Like, my goal may be to live simply, but that could look very different throughout the years. And it has for us because we had the little house by the beach, and now we're in the RV, and then at some point we may be in a house again. Those are all situational. Those are our environment, but living simply is the value.
Okay, so Kate and I just realized that we're on Skype, and our audio messed up. And during that, we both realized that we kind of think the opposite on this topic. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to work this out for a second. So, Kate, what were you saying exactly? How do you view your goals versus your values?
Yes. So I think goals are the way that you reach the destination of your values. So your values should be more foundational. They may change slightly, but they shouldn't be so specific that, like a goal for me might be to travel full time in my RV, right? That was a goal of mine for a while, and then now we're doing it. But the value for us was to live simply. That was the why. So the
Gotcha.
why is right. Like, so that, I mean, that's kind of the way I always think of my values, is like they're the why, they're the reason underneath the goals that I then set.
Right.
What do you think?
Okay. And so well, no, and I actually agree with you. I guess what I was thinking was that, like, for
Yeah.
somebody, their values are, yes, they are the underlying current. I
Uh
know
huh.
we've actually talked about that before, how our values are just like this undertow in a way
Uh
that
huh.
carry you to your goals. Um, but I guess, I don't know. Maybe you just changed my mind. I don't know.
No,
I,
you know what? I think that we're on the same page. I think it's just the way that maybe that we're both wording it,
yeah,
because you and I have talked so much,
yeah,
just on the phone as friends about our values and our goals. And so I think
right.
I think we're on the same page. I think we're
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Cause I was saying that your values are what, um, like your values are the consistent things, but like
yeah.
say I was saying like a goal is to live simply, but your values are how you get there. And so you're kind of
Yeah.
saying the opposite, but yeah, I mean, I think you can look at it either way and still obtain what
Yeah.
you're wanting. But
Well,
I
and
agree with you.
why
I agree with
yeah,
you.
but and why couldn't it be a goal to live simply, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
I think that that's a worthy goal, and
Yeah.
then as you would work toward that goal, you would break that down into more manageable chunks, right?
Right. Right.
Because, like,
Yeah.
living, we've talked about this before, living simply can be expressed a million different ways. And
Hmm.
so then that's when you're like, okay, well, what is our version of living simply? And then that's how you would get to it.
Okay. Well, for example, people who have watched the Marie Kondo show and they go, oh, I need to declutter my space. I have to get rid of all this stuff. We got to do this. So they go about doing this goal, right? They have a goal that they have
Uh-huh.
set. And in doing that, it creates values. And I think that that is kind of what I was trying to say was the
Yeah.
values can come out of reaching a goal too.
So do you think that maybe by taking action that then gives clarity to your values?
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. Because I know
Yeah.
I am such an, well, and it goes back to being reactive, right? And being intentional. Maybe being reactive is a good thing sometimes, right? Maybe
Yeah.
being reactive to a goal that you are wanting, that you've set for yourself, and then changing your values based on that is a good thing, right? You're reacting because it's actually positive
Yeah.
steps. So I don't know.
Yeah.
We're probably just confusing all of our listeners right now, but this is what Kate and I do. We talk it out.
No, I think it's great, because I think this creates space for, if you're listening, for you to come into this conversation with us, and to, have your own view on it, and to see also that there's different ways to approach doing life. And so Melissa and I we love sharing, what we're doing with our families and our own viewpoints, but that doesn't mean that we know it all. We aren't the
Right.
experts. We're just sharing our journeys.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, so that kind of brings us to our next one. Our next like tip
Yeah.
is during this process of finding what you value the most and what you want your family's values to be, you have to set your non-negotiables. There's always going to be some things that are going to ebb and flow with the seasons and the years that, you know what, this season, my kids are busy. You know what? My kids are busy. Mine aren't right now, actually. But if your kids were busy, that's a season of life. And maybe at one point, that was not something that was on
Yeah.
your values. You did not want to be busy, but your children's happiness and having them go towards their own goals has kind of trumped your original value. So I think that within that you have to have those non-negotiables.
Yeah.
So maybe you're like, nope, my kids will never be busy. That is a non-negotiable. We will make this work. They will get to do extra things, but without over reaching our schedule or
Yeah.
like making our schedule too busy. So, and these are all just what ifs. But yeah, so Yeah,
Well,
that's the
yeah,
second
and
one.
I had two thoughts about that when you were saying that. One, I think that like socially, we kind of stereotype certain ways of living as like this is what simple living looks like, or this is what it
Right.
looks like for kids to not be busy. And I was thinking about, Melissa, I was thinking about when you were homeschooling
Yeah.
and your kids were actually busier, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like, when they were home with you
Mm-hmm.
than they are now in public school.
Yep.
And I know that's not the case for everyone, but I know that that was kind of what attracted me to homeschooling. I was like, oh, my kids are going to be home. It's going to be a slower way of living. And I think it is for a lot of homeschooling
Yeah.
families, but
Yeah.
not always. And so I don't know. I just feel like that was a really important thing to note, that only you know your non-negotiables, and you also know the way that you're going to express that in your family's life. So
Right.
it could look
Right.
different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and something else, and I'm sorry, I feel like for some reason I'm being really chatty on this episode,
Well, it's
but
because you got some good things to say.
I know, no, so do you, so do you. But I go through periods of time where I get really busy with all of my side projects and my work, because I teach online for university, and I've had my own podcast, and I do all these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I value, as I'm sure all of you listening do, I value my relationship with my kids so much that
Mm-hmm.
whenever I start to let that other part of my life kind of domino and get out of control, my
Right.
non-negotiable of my kids always pulls me back. And I'm like, no, 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 wait a second. My relationship with them is priority. So like all this other stuff, I have to take a step away from and make sure that I'm still meeting that need.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
that's just another way to think about like your non-negotiables,
Mm-hmm.
because they will scream out at you when you are not listening to them.
Yep, literally.
Oh, yeah.
My kids might scream. I'm like, "What?" No, I'm kidding. No, those are
So
good
true.
though, and I feel like too. Again, throughout the years, just reevaluating what your values are and figuring out those non-negotiables. So recently, and Kate, I think you probably kind of know this, but my family, we've kind of become vegan. I say kind of, but I mean we really are. On that cusp of living that lifestyle, and that has created new non-negotiables for us. And so be willing and open to just creating those new non-negotiables. Just know that they will change, or if something that was a non-negotiable before changes to that's negotiable now. Like, don't feel guilty for that. So just know things can
Yes.
change through your life.
Well, and I would even say that, as my kids have grown and gotten older, my non negotiables have changed. And so being aware of that, like Melissa said, and being willing to switch them is huge. And that can make such a difference in whether or not you are truly living intentionally with your days. So, speaking of being intentional, I've definitely got being more intentional with my health on my mind since the new year. I'm trying to sleep more, eat more veggies, and definitely get my vitamins, covering all of my bases. This year, you can also make health and wellness a top priority with the help of Care of's monthly subscription vitamin service. Whether you're focused on glowing skin, boosting your energy levels, getting more sleep, or just generally being healthy.
Absolutely. And taking my Care of personalized daily vitamin packs has made it so easy too. I love how the online quiz helps target my vitamin needs through questions about my diet, health goals, and lifestyle choices.
Right. And the vegan and the vegetarian options make it possible for you to have your cake or your kale and eat it too. I'm just grateful that I don't have to think about it and I can get my personalized vitamins delivered directly to my door.
And no matter what your diet is, you always need to make sure you're getting all of your nutrients. My family and I thrive on a vegan diet, and the addition of Care of has helped us reach all of our nutritional needs.
Okay, friends, if you're interested in trying Care of, we highly recommend you go to their website and take the quiz. Go to takecareof.com to give them a try. And if you do, let us know what you think.
And just for our listeners, take advantage of this month's special New Year offer. For 50% off your first month of personalized care of vitamins, go to takecareof.com and enter Cohesive Home 50. That's takecareof.com and code Cohesive Home 50. We'll put their link and the discount code in our show notes for easy access. Now, back to the show. Okay, so another way to be intentional with your days instead of being reactive is make sure that your days are organized.
So to be totally honest, Melissa and I are not super organized.
Oh, how true this is.
Yeah. So this is something that we talk about a lot about, like, okay, my days are out of control. I don't feel like I'm getting done what I need to get done. I don't know where I'm supposed to be. Like, I know I have all these things I need to do, but I have a planner, but it's not planning for me. Help.
Yep.
So we are talking to ourselves here. You may be very organized, and hats off to you. Can you email us some tips? Can you help?
Seriously. For real.
No, we
on the
actually
podcast.
With the Whitney English interview was awesome, and then we're actually going to have someone else on later this spring to talk about time blocking your schedule, and so we're so excited about that. I think it's going to be great.
Yes.
With that said, we may not be the experts, but we do know that it is really helpful to plan your day the night before. It's also helpful to have maybe just 3 things that you're trying to accomplish every day instead of 20, and then you feel like you fail. I know Melissa and I have both found that waking up early, even just a little bit before our kids, and having 10 or 15 or 30 minutes to get our heads on straight before we have to take on the day, like that helps us to be more intentional instead of just reactive.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, every time we're on the phone, Kate, and I can hear your kids in the background, and I know that like there's just a lot going on. It reminds me so much of whenever I was home with I had 3 kids in 3 years, so I had little babies like screaming at me and needing my attention all hours of the day, and I remember it was a very reactive time in my life. And so just know that if you are a stay-at-home mom right now or dad and you find yourself being reactive in situations, it's okay. Give yourself some grace, because this is one of those times in your life when sometimes to get through the day, you just have to be reactive to every little fire that's going on or every need and every whim of your children. And so just know that, we're not necessarily talking about you, but even still, you can still organize your days in a way that it will help you be less reactive, that you will be more present. And so, yes, getting up just a little bit early or the night before, that's what I try and do. I know if the night before, if I have not looked at my calendar and said, okay, what do I have tomorrow? Or, okay, what am I making the kids for lunch tomorrow? Like having just even a semblance of a slight plan, that helps me so much. And I know that we've talked about this in our planning episode, I believe, but that organization, even just a little bit, can go a long way.
Yes. Yeah. And so a couple of things just popped up for me while you were talking, Melissa, because I think those are amazing suggestions. And so like to piggyback off of that, how you plan your days determines how you live your life. So like it can be very tempting to get stuck in the nitty gritty of the day to day. And like you're always, I have my head down, I got to get through today. And I really truthfully, like for big periods of my motherhood journey, that has been the case for me. I've got my head down. I am just trying to get through the day. But it is helpful every once in a while to lift your head up and to just kind of ask yourself, like, what are my goals? And how do these tie into what I value? What direction am I heading? What direction are we heading as a family? And is this where we want to go? So when you kind of meditate on those questions, during your day, it can kind of add a little bit of purpose. You may not be able to act on it, right? Your goal that you're working toward might be several years off, and right now you are just trying to get through the day. But having that in the back of your mind, it gives you something to think about and work toward. And I feel like that's a huge motivator.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, now that you've organized your days, this is something that will help with this whole organization of your days. But tip 4 is be willing to say no. Just say no. I'm holding up a big X right now. We need to start like YouTube podcasting so they can see what I'm doing. Or maybe not. Maybe we shouldn't do that. I'm also in my pajamas right now. So, yes.
It's okay. I'm in my truck.
No. Right. We do what we have to do so you can get your podcast. We're doing it all for you guys.
Yes. So, being willing to say no, easier said than done, right? Like it can be so hard to tell someone no, or to quit something that you've been doing that takes up your time and isn't actually helping you be intentional about living out your values, right?
Yep.
But it is so worth it to identify those activities that are draining you, that are causing you to be reactive in your days, and aren't giving you the margin that you need to think clearly. Because when our days are packed full, right, like we're not thinking clearly. We're just going through the motions as quickly as possible and trying to get to bed each night. And that's just not the way to live.
No, it's not.
In fact, Melissa, actually, you recently had to say no to something. It was really hard. Do you mind sharing with everyone what that was?
Yeah, of course. So many of you listening may already know this, but I was attending aromatherapy school. I started, when was that, in September? And started this last semester and realized that I, A, was not enjoying it. B, it was not serving my future. Like my goals have changed and I didn't see myself continuing on that path. And so it took me a few weeks to finally realize that I needed to say no to it. And I ended up, I'm an aromatherapy school dropout, but cue the song. But yeah, it felt like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. And just so kind of tying into what we had said before in our other tips, when I had initially wanted to start aromatherapy school, we were living in Oklahoma. I was homeschooling my children. I was looking for something that I could create a business or do something after I had graduated from home while I was still schooling my children. Well, fast forward, a year, and we're here and my kids are in school and things just changed. Our priorities changed and my schedule changed and just all of these things. And I had to be completely honest with myself and say, okay, are you willing to say no to this? Because this is obviously not what you should be doing right now. And it was hard because I didn't want to be a failure. I didn't want people to look at me as a failure. But I had to say, who cares what people think about me? What's best for my family and for me and my well-being and my mental state. And so, said no to aromatherapy school.
Well, I know we've talked about this, but I think it was such a good decision. You have to do, like you said, you have to do what's best for yourself and for your family. And you had made the decision to attend when your life was totally different. And so I think if you're listening and you're hearing this and like maybe you have something in your life that is not serving you well, but you've been hanging on to it because you invested time or you invested money or, you're just, you're afraid of what people might think, but you have to live your life in a way that reflects your values. And sometimes we have to make those hard decisions like you did, Melissa.
Right. Yep. And, it was a goal to do that at one point, and now that's not a goal of mine.
Yeah.
I had to make the choice based on my values, not my goal. So,
Yep.
All right. So that was me. Yeah. Well, what is our last tip, Kate?
Yeah, this one is my favorite. I have been just really delving into this world right now and also working with my mama clients on this. But our last tip is to watch your mindset, to be aware of where your thoughts are on a daily basis and to help steer them toward a more positive direction so that the way that you think about yourself and your day and your goals doesn't derail you.
Right. Yeah, this is going to be probably the hardest one, I think. Other than maybe saying no to stuff, but watching your mindset is a big one. It's something that you have to work on every single day. I don't know. How about you, Kate? I mean, is this
Yeah.
something that you look at every day?
Yes. Yes, 100%. So, I advise on this, and it's also something that I have to work on because I struggle with it. So I tend to have a more negative mindset. Melissa knows. And a lot of this, like if you can relate, if this is something you struggle with, so the way that we're raised, the ideas that we're exposed to, the experiences we have, all of these kind of form this blueprint of how we then view the world. And they're just thoughts.
Yep.
They're just thoughts, and your thoughts will float through your mind, and you have the ability to observe them and to recognize, like, this is a really negative thought. This isn't actually reality. So, like,
Right.
an example would be maybe you feel like you're really struggling with finances. And I'm not a financial expert, so this is not like that kind of advice, but maybe you really struggle with finances and you're trying to be more intentional in your days with the ways that you handle money. And so say something goes wrong. Maybe, a payment gets taken out and there wasn't enough in your bank account to cover it, or you forget to pay a bill, or just something of that sort. And so your mindset might click in and you might start thinking, oh gosh, I'm so terrible with money. I'm a failure. I'm always going to be bad with money. Well, those are just your perception of what's happening. And so what can be helpful then is to stop those thoughts, which is easier said than done, but you recognize them, you stop them, and then you reframe them and think about what you were learning and how you were changing. So this is kind of like super down and dirty on
Yeah.
mindset change. I think at some point it would be fun to do like a whole episode on this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because you and I were talking a little bit ago, even I've been slightly stressed out about some things going on.
Yes.
And, you know, Kate was like, well, don't hold on to that stress. Don't be stressed out right now. And I'm like, look, the way that I shift my mindset when I'm stressed out, and this is just my tip, this is just how I do things, but I definitely can feel that shift even in my physical body. I get tense, I get anxious, and I know that I am being reactive. And so I have to be mindful about setting my goals for that day. Instead of don't look at long-term goals, look at your day, and compartmentalize the things that you have, say, on your to-do list. Because I know, especially as women, the women listening, you are going to probably relate to this of just always having a list, having that list of things that you want to do in that day, and knowing that there may not be time in the day to do it, but just looking at your list and just starting to say, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and then I'm going to do this thing, and then I'm going to do this other thing. And sometimes I have to say, okay, I'm going to clean my kitchen before I edit this podcast, because I know that if my kitchen's clean, my mindset is better. I feel more calm. So it's just making sure that you are going about even daily tasks intentionally. So that's how I shift my mindset.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes,
if that
and I
gives
think
any
that's
value to anyone, but
no, I think that's huge because like the way that we feel in our bodies then determines our thoughts and vice versa. So like you were saying how when you're stressed, you feel it in your body. right? And so
Yes.
for you, by stopping and maybe almost getting like tunnel vision and just like focusing on one task at a time, doing something more physical like cleaning your kitchen instead of, if you're already stressed out about finances, don't go do your budget.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
So I think that that's such great advice, Melissa.
Thanks.
Definitely.
Yeah, it works. It's been working a long time for me. I used to be very reactive with my stress.
Yes.
My mom, for some odd reason, she always used to tell me, "Oh my gosh, you get stressed out so easy." Okay, she doesn't.
And
listen
that
to this.
probably
She
made
doesn't
you.
listen to the podcast, so I can talk about her.
I know,
She-
right?
she's like, you
Mom,
just always
Mom,
get
are you
stressed out."
listening?
No, our moms don't listen. Anyway,
Well, and you
yeah.
hear that though, and then it perpetuates like the idea of who you are. Like, oh no, I am someone who's stressed all the time, and then
Yeah, or I don't handle stress well. Right.
yes, and then so naturally that message sinks in, and then you start living it out. So like that's so awesome that you're being proactive and saying, no, I do get stressed, but I'm also really strong and I am able to handle what's on my plate.
Yes.
And you
yes.
do.
Or I say no to something so I don't get stressed.
There you go. There you go. Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
man. And so, we hope that this also encourages you to just, embrace your values, protect your schedule and your days, keep those sacred, remember what matters most, and just give yourself grace, because Melissa and I, all of us in on this podcast, like we're all just a work in progress.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode. We wanted to give you one quick announcement that in 2 weeks, on March 1st, Kate and I are going to be launching our very first class. It is called Living Simply with Kids.
We are so excited to share this class with you. This is a incredibly practical application of everything that Melissa and I have learned over the last 7-8 years of being minimalist and practicing this with our kids. And so we share tips for decluttering your kids' spaces, creating a capsule wardrobe, how to deal with sentimental items, and how to stay organized and keep the clutter from coming back. Like I said, very practical, very hands-on. This is completely different from anything that you have heard on our podcast. We haven't shared this information anywhere else, and we're just so excited for you to have this in your earbuds and in your hands as you go about creating the home that you desire for your family.
Yes, so stay on the lookout for that. And we hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you loved it, we would just really appreciate it if you shared it with a friend. Also, if you really love us, you could give us a really great review on iTunes, because that helps our podcast a lot. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.